a sense of how strong the demand for the logistics sector is?
Absolutely. The rise of logistics sector is probably a global trend even before the pandemic. And the pandemic has increased the attractiveness of the logistics sector, in particular in Asia. And let me give you a few examples, because most of the logistics sector demand comes from e-commerce. And for example, in China, where e-commerce penetration rate is about 25%. And in South Korea, that e-commerce penetration rate is about 26%. And during the pandemic, the rise of e-commerce sales has increased by triple or even 6 or 7 times, especially in the grocery store sector, online grocery sector. And that also boosted a subsector within logistics, and which is cold storage.
Which markets in particular are you seeing the strongest growth potential?
So across the region, the growth of e-commerce sector has benefited the logistics sector. In particular, we're seeing the highest growth potential in China, in South Korea, and even in Japan, where e-commerce penetration rate is substantially below that of those of China and South Korea. We're also seeing some of the highest growth amongst Japan in terms of logistic demand.
That's logistics. How about in terms of office space, Elysia? Because we've heard from the likes of Barclays CEO Jes Staley talking about the long-term adjustments that he's seeing about in terms of locations away from city center. What are you expecting that? How will that play out in Asia?
That's one view, and in LaSalle, we believe that there will be some companies who would want to move away or move some of their operations away from city center as long as the pandemic lasts. But there are a few very interesting characteristics that which we believe differentiates several major Asia Pacific markets from other regions. For example, human behavioral influence on tenant demand. Let me give an example. The sooner people can or willing to come back to the office, the lesser of that permanent impact on office demand it will be. And as we know in Asia, in markets such as Shanghai, Seoul, the return to office ratio in China has been above 90%. The return to office ratio in Seoul has been 70 or 80%. In Singapore, we're hitting the return to office ratio up to almost 50%. So to some extent, we believe working from home or remote working could be one of the options, but there are many traits. For example, cultural elements. Face-to-face meeting is considered a very important business ritual in many Asian culture. For example, in China, in Japan, in South Korea, and also in some of these highly urbanized cities, the residential units are relatively small. So for people to be able to work from home as a permanent option, it's least feasible. So we believe there could be some permanent impact coming out of the pandemic, but the office demand or having people to meet in a physical space to collaborate is one of the key elements that's here to stay. But maybe there could be some changes in terms of the impact on pandemic. For example, corporate offices might have to have more collaboration space, meeting space, Elysia, when people find a need to come back to the office.
Elysia, that's it. Okay, so as people go back to offices and perhaps offices in city centres, they're going to be going past shops and the like. So, of course, retailers should be able to pick up, have their business pick up. That affects your e-commerce business then, doesn't it? So what are you at the moment predicting for that in this part of the world?
That's one view. And for example, there will be a lot of the shopping, for example, household goods that people might still want to purchase online, especially when we talked about like human behavioral influence. We are seeing people now are adapting or forced to adapt to shopping online because of the pandemic. And people are finding the convenience of being able to shop online, having their payment methods that's already saved in the retail e-commerce websites. So some of these habits are here to stay, especially for a lot of the household goods online shopping.
Elysia, I'm very interested in what you also had to say, because, I mean, here you could see e-commerce holding up because essentially of almost muscle memory in a funny sort of way. But tell us a little bit more about human behavior in all this and how you see that developing in this part of the world. And, of course, you have to take into account, as you also alluded to, those cultural elements too.
Absolutely. So we've talked about office sector, like human behavioral, people wanted to come back and collaborate. That's one element. Face-to-face meeting, that's one element. But if we move on to other commercial real estate sectors, for example, retail sector, as we know, the retail sector reinvents itself with different formats, different tenant mix to tailor to people or consumers' needs. For example, discretionary retail, especially for example, some of these experience shopping, health, beauty, kids' educations, all of these require people to meet in person in the physical space. So we're most likely going to see more of these tenant mix in the future of the retail sector.